Hello, everyone. Welcome again to our podcast. Again, today I have scored a fantastic guest. I think you'll agree with me when we get into it. Today I've invited Doug Sprague to join me, and I've worked very closely with Doug on multiple clients. Doug is our strategic advisor for really anything to do with Medicare or Medicaid when we have clients with health plans or those kinds of issues where it requires that specialized expertise. So Doug works with our team and leads those kinds of efforts and oftentimes with those client relationships for us. In addition, Doug also has his own market research firm, ASQ360 Market Research. And so sometimes we work with Doug in that way as well. Doug, welcome.
Thanks, Jared. It's good to be here.
Doug is one of the most sort of strategic, put together persons or people I've worked with in a while. I love that, Doug. I get done with you. We get done with a client meeting. Boom, there's the notes. Everything's ready to go. It's so nice. Makes our life so much easier. So appreciate all the work Doug brings, and especially the strategic insights. So to that end, today, we recognize that our audience is really broad here. We have people that are from hospitals and health systems, multi-location providers, pharma, device, SaaS, telehealth, and Medicare Advantage and Medicaid plans and health plans. So today, for those of you that are in the health plan world, I think you'll find this particularly timely and useful. For those of you that from other worlds, I think you're still going to find this a fascinating dive into Medicare or Medicaid. Today, we're going to focus on Medicare to understand how that all works. And I think there's a lot to learn, even if you're not in that world. But today, we'll primarily focus on folks that are working in Medicare Advantage. So Doug, as we go through this, please remember to give a little bit of context once in a while to folks that don't understand the vernacular to make sure we don't just leave them behind in the dust. Each of these niches, by the way, as you know, are all different, right? We're working with pharma or device or Medicare or whatever. They're all different. So Doug, Medicare Advantage is in the news. It's changing. We have a new administration coming in. It'll be interesting to see how that impacts it because it's like, we love Medicare. We hate Medicare or Medicare Advantage. It's like there's controversy happening more frequently. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about what's the overall status of Medicare Advantage. How are the new CMS proposals and physician cuts are going to shape the market? Like what's going on out there?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Had we had this conversation, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, it may be a different story than it is today. Last year, as we headed into the calendar year 2025 AEP, there was a lot of worrying concern. CMS had cut the rates last year, and there was expectant of a rate decrease again this year, and how that would affect the profitability of the plans, how it would affect benefits available for the beneficiaries, the consumers, and yet things never seem to stay the same. Last Friday, CMS provided their first look at payment proposals for 2026, and they're actually proposing a 4.33% rate hike, which basically comes to about $21 billion more in federal payments compared to last year. And that's huge from previous years where these increases were either under 1% or even negative. And so the landscape is never static. We can never say we know what's going on. And so predictability, and you can go back and look at some of the prognostications from last year about what this year is going to be like. Well, that's now kind of all up in the air. And a couple of reasons for that. One, this has just been proposed by CMS. It doesn't mean that it's in place. We have a new administration coming in just a few days. And though the administration has said that they want to help and support Medicare, what will end up happening remains to be seen. So from that perspective, we're still in a wait and see mode. Now, with this announcement, some good things that can come to that. Potentially for the plans and the members. There might be richer benefits. Last year, there was a reduction in benefits. There was an increase in premiums, an increase in deductibles because the plans were really worried about their profitability. Now, don't get me wrong, Medicare Advantage plans are profitable businesses. However, when you look at Wall Street as an example, last year, the profitability started dipping. And so there was a lot of concern there in terms of how would they remain profitable going into this next year, especially with these CMS imposed reductions. But CMS came back at 4.33% as their proposal. And so this may actually impact providing better benefits than had suspected. The addition or the addition back in of some of the supplemental benefits, and then hopefully some stability in the premiums. There is one impact here on physicians, though. Part of this proposal was a cut again in the fee schedule, and so physicians are feeling the squeeze there. And so networks might be squeezed by this, but again, these are just proposals, so we're going to see what happens. One of the other proposals that happened in the whole Mass Advantage space. So, as you know, Mass Advantage is two parts. It's the Medicare Advantage plan and or the Part D plan. And so about 96% of those that have a Medicare Advantage plan have a Part D portion of it. And there was a proposed max for this year, about 2,100, which basically remains the same over last year with some increases due to growth in the economy. But so what does this really mean? These are significant improvements if they go in place. Last year was a 0.2% cut. In 2024, it's 1.1% cut. So this really helps offset some of those utilization costs. But we have to wait and see. On the stock market side, insurance stocks have risen just recently this week based on this news. Some analysts are basically predicting that there'll be further improvements under the new administration. And the stabilization may help return plans into the marketplace. Last year, we saw 18 different plans exit the market. And so that was a decrease of about 6.54% of what's available out in the marketplace. So where does that leave us? That's a really good question. Medicare Advantage in general, when we look at it, has grown over the last several years in terms of its penetration rate. We're at about 55% of all Medicare beneficiaries right now being in a Medicare Advantage plan. That's roughly 33 to 35 million seniors, and it's on track to continue to grow. In fact, some expectations will be 60% penetration by 2030, which is just 5 years away. What's really interesting about that, too, is that in 5 years, in 2030, that will be the first year that we switch from all boomers being part and above being part of Medicare Advantage and the first year of Gen Xers. And so it'll be really interesting to see how that changes the landscape of marketing and benefits and delivery systems. But from the Medicare Advantage footprint, it continues to grow. As I mentioned, we're at about 55% now, and we see that continually growing. So as we face into that, what is the bottom line? This 4.3% increase won't solve all the profitability challenges that plans have. It will provide significant relief compared to recent years, and it should help plans maintain their benefits, if not increase them, while working towards better target margins. When we look at the plan base, in this past AEP, there were 4,000 different plan offerings. And what I mean by that is not companies offering an MAPD plan, but actual plans. So in one company, you might be able to get an HMO plan or a PPO plan. So there are 4,000 opportunities last year in these plans. And that's with a 6.5% decline in plans offering. As we go into this year, right now, there are about 34 actual companies offering an MAPD option. 18 exited last year. However, I've heard there are some rumors out there that there are some plans that will be entering the marketplace for 2025 to offer 2026 benefits. In terms of looking at the overall current stage, it's the big ones. United Healthcare, Humana, CVS, Aetna, they account for about 58% of all Medicare Advantage enrollees. United Healthcare and Humana alone control 47%. So the landscape challenge for the smaller or medium-sized plans is there in order to be able to gain that market share. However, these larger entities are the ones that are having some of the greater profitability issues. So going into 2026, small and medium-sized plans have a great opportunity as long as they're putting together the right mix of their marketing to gather market share.
Very good. Well, that was a lot. I appreciate all the statistics. How are the Medicare Advantage conversions from original Medicare or Medigap trending, and what's changed in the marketing channels? I mean, the broker influence, shift towards more tech savvy boomers. Like, what's happening there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, as Medicare Advantage has grown over the last several years, the question is, where are these beneficiaries coming from? And traditionally, it's really being pulled from those that were on the traditional original Medicare. As we went into the privatization of Medicare, the wooing was done by these Medicare Advantage plans to those on original Medicare, saying that they would get additional benefits and better fees and things like that. And so the original Medicare and also the Medicare supplement became fodder for pulling members in. However, as those populations have started to decrease, we're really entering a phase now where competition is really between Medicare Advantage plan and Medicare Advantage plan. And so, at the end of the day, when your head's up and trying to get new members from another Medicare Advantage plan that is offering very similar types of benefits, similar premiums, deductibles, maximum out of pocket, the reliance on some of these supplemental benefits has come to play. When we look at the market, every year the amount of people that are switching grows. It's not huge. When we look at that MA to MA conversion, around 1 out of every 3 seniors will shop. So, for example, in this last AEP, about a third of the seniors took a look at plans and said, yeah, I might consider switching. But in reality, we only look about 16% of those that actually end up making a switch. A good chunk of that from traditional Medicare to an MA plan, drawn by the extra benefits, the maximum out-of-pocket protection, and zero premiums that the MA plan can provide. And then from the Med Sup, Med Gap premiums are rising. $150, $200, $300 a month. There are cost-conscious consumer or seniors who really want that zero premium MA plan, so it's really attractive. But what we're finding is that even with that conversion, that switching to an MA plan is around 16%. And so what that means to marketers is you have to be really savvy. You have to have your right message. You have to have your right target. You have to understand their behavioral, and you have to understand how that comes together based on their age group, whether they're new to Medicare, this is their first or second year in a Medicare Advantage plan, or they've been in a Medicare Advantage plan for the last 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. So where this really is kind of affecting the conversion, as I mentioned, it's really Medicare Advantage plan to Medicare Advantage plan, and the companies that can really differentiate themselves in their messaging, the way they localize themselves to the local market and the beneficiaries, the better they're going to be at that. And of course, adding on the supplemental benefits and making sure that they have parity in their core benefits, being their premiums, their deductibles, their maximum out of pocket. There is something interesting that's looming out there, and that really is the role of the broker. In previous years, brokers have really been instrumental. In fact, some surveys will tell you that anywhere between 40 to 60% of a Medicare beneficiary's decision is affected, improved on, done by a broker or a field marketing organization. And what's happened last year, CMS came out and said, we want to make some changes here. We want to put some caps on spending and commissions. And people thought that that's what was going to happen, that there would be a final ruling that standardized commissions, put a cap on agent broken non-salary compensations and some other things. Well, that ended up in court. And so right now, we're still not sure. On the average, broker commissions last year did increase, but not really knowing if that court decision is going to come out in 2025 or 2026. When that happens, it is going to really affect that broker-member relationship because there'll be more parity in terms of what brokers can do and parity in terms of the commission schedule. So as we look at those conversions, those are some things that we're keeping our eye on, see how they'll be affected next year. But as we look at it right now in terms of 2025 and looking into this year's AEP, we have to go with the fact that things are going to stay as is. And so the same approach in terms of your split between direct marketing, direct to consumer marketing, broker channel marketing will remain the same.
So I love by the way, the data, Doug, because it helps guide marketing decisions. And that's, as an agency, as you know, we always talk about data-driven marketing. Yep. But I think the insight about, how many times now it's no longer convincing to try Medicare Advantage, it's more about switching. That's a whole different kind of a game in terms of marketing messaging and appeal. And, I think that this particular category, from the outside feels like it never changes, but it changes a lot as we're talking about right now. And in fact, the timing of our recording of this podcast, we wanted to wait a little bit into 2025 to make sure that we knew what the latest was, because it'll change again next year and maybe next week for all we know. So the one of the things that we talked about offline was the marketing fundamentals of marketing to seniors and the cost concerns. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So, and you said earlier, there's so many different niches and the different type of nomenclature that's used. But when it comes to marketing, right, there are longstanding marketing truths. and especially when it comes to healthcare. And these are rooted in trust building, education, simplicity, local relationships. These are really what's at the heart, I would say, of Medicare Advantage marketing. When we're talking with a senior population, and this is why CMS exists. It's that layer of protection to prevent fraud or taking advantage of seniors. And so when a Medicare Advantage plan is looking at some of these, what stays, as all these changes, what stays, there are 7 things I think that shouldn't change and haven't changed. And the first is trust is everything. When we look at the Medicare Advantage beneficiary, they rely on relationships. They rely on word of mouth. In fact, when you're looking at that MA to MA conversion, after direct mail and after TV as being the most influential channels, word of mouth is the third most influential channel. It's about 20% say that word of mouth is why they switched plans. So having that ability to rely on word of mouth, the agent credibility, and the trust that's built with a plan that says they are local and provides local, those are good for the Medicare beneficiary market. What's not good are the too good to be true pitches. Seniors are getting wary of the use of free, underlined free, bolded free. Although great word for direct response marketing, it's become tiresome in the senior market because they've come to not necessarily believe those as really influential differences when they're making their decision. So trust is everything. That stays core. Education trumps selling. All we would have to do to prove this is take those 34 plans from last year and gather all their marketing material and throw it out on a table and ask for differentiation. And it would be really hard to see because everybody is talking about the $0 premiums or the low deductibles or the maximum out of pocket or the unique blend of supplemental benefits. But what seniors really want, they get that. They know those are the things they look for, and those are the things they're concerned about. Money is important to them, but what they prefer is to be educated rather than sold. They respond much better to thorough, unbiased information without high pressure tactics that details things for them, like cost and what do they mean? What do the premiums mean? How are deductibles developed? You may have heard the term MOOP, maximum out of pocket. What does that mean? And these matter to them, and understanding those in terms of their ability to make a switch. There was a study done last year and talked about the anxiety that is raised during AEP. And about 60% of those who are in the annual enrollment period feel this deep anxiety about switching health plans because of the lack of understanding of some of the particulars that make it up. So education is number 2. We really have to continue with that. Number 3, this is not a marketing aha. This is a marketing must do, multi-channel integration. As I've mentioned, direct mail is number 1 right now in terms of, and has been, it's been the stalwart of driving individuals to drive interest in a Medicare Advantage plan, followed by TV being influential. 75% of this target market uses the internet, and they look at that to educate themselves, find out more information, and basically prepare themselves as they go into the AP. So making sure that a plan is everywhere, online, offline, in multiple ways of doing that. And that includes your social media channels, your paid search and your paid display, your TV, your over the OTT, your cable TV, your direct mail, your out of home. The more messaging that we can give beneficiaries, building up on trust and education, the better it will be for getting that individual to the next step of that enrollment funnel once they inform themselves of actually engaging in a conversation to convert. When we look at this group, and I'll say 65 above, and it actually makes sense even for below 65, simplicity and clarity is a must. Seniors don't want big words. They don't want fancy words. They want to understand simply what a plan has, what it offers, and how it's different. Being able to easily compare plan comparisons, step-by-step benefit explanations, taking key technical jargon like MOOP and making it understandable in terms of the amount of maximum you'll pay out of your pocket. Those are the types of things that seniors are drawn to, that 65 plus marketplace wants to hear, because it takes away that layer of being disingenuous. And so, again, pillar number 4, being simple and being clear. 5 is really understanding that cost with this market drives decisions. Sure, we may have a ton of great benefits to offer supplementally, vision and hearing, dental and fitness and food and transportation and in-home type of stuff. But at the end of the day, this, especially the older we get in the 65 plus, cost is a concern. You have people on fixed incomes who decide that their budget is spent a certain amount away, and they're always looking at premium costs at the top of the list. With changes that have happened last year, the average, even though people love the zero premium, the average premium rate last year was about $17. Increases in that cause individuals to want to switch. So being understanding that cost is a concern, premiums top of the list, deductibles and MOOP weighing heavily. They just want clear cost to benefit explanations. So 6 on the list is taking a look at health concerns. In marketing, there are a couple of avenues we take. One is aspirational. We show people doing things that we would want to be doing, that we would aspire to. Sometimes there's truth in marketing as well. Sometimes seniors want to see active seniors, but not too active seniors. Seeing a senior skiing down a black diamond slope is not the reality for most seniors, but seeing a senior active, walking, looking healthy is. So when we take a look at lifestyle marketing, we really have to show ads that show active seniors, but with real medical worries, doctor networks, prescription coverage, chronic issues. Those matter to seniors. And so being able to have that healthy balance between how you present your plan and how you present the image of the seniors that you're working with. So being true to that lifestyle marketing is number 6. And finally, I believe that local beats national. And here's why. 65 plus, they want to know that their plan is down the street. Now, many of the nationals out there, they are in the local markets. They continue to expand county by county, but they don't have the local headquarters there in the local market. They don't have local branches in the local market. Local agents, community-based branding, personal touch, outcompete impersonal call centers and broadband national ads hands down. And so for plans that are reaching a local community, whether that's 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 15 local counties or in a tri-state area or such, they really need to focus on that community-based messaging. So those are, for me, those are the 7 kind of always use, stalwart, continue, no matter the changes in the landscape. Those are the things that I think are important for plans to put in their marketing.
So, Doug, one of the things that you and I have talked about a lot is, and we're going to talk about this more in a moment, the sort of traditional model of going after seniors and, newer ways of doing it. The interesting thing to me is that when you talk about boomers, that's a 20-year span or something. That's like incredibly different. At the very beginning of that, World War II had been over for a couple days. Into that, it's far, far memory. And so the culture, the environment, kids were brought up on various stages of that. So there's a big difference. Our strategist, Kathy, as you probably remember, talks about the Jones generation, which is the latter half of that cohort, which is very different. They grew up with Scooby-Doo, not Howdy Doody. And so it's a different kind of thing altogether. So as things evolve, I'd love to talk about, the traditional, you just mentioned what the traditional segments are, TV, newspaper, radio, but how do they do different segments? Like what are the different segments and how does that work for the traditional stuff?
So, traditionally, and it's a really good point generationally as we look at it. And, as I mentioned, in 5 years, Gen X is going to be on the table, and then the millennials, and then Gen Z and Gen Alpha. And I think this is the first year of Gen Beta. Individuals are born this year, Gen Beta. But, from a marketing standpoint, we've always got to be attuned to what it is that is being effective. What is allowing people to get the message, interact with the message, engage with the company, and then take action on that. We will continue to see shifts, especially moving into the prevalence of the digital transformation and landscape. It makes sense when you think about the end of the Joneses going into the Gen X. These are the generations that have seen crazy mad shifts in technology, from the rotary phone to cell phones, from ovens to microwaves, from newspapers and libraries to the worldwide internet where you can find anything you can possibly want. And so these changes into technology and digital advances surely are changing the landscape of how we market to individuals. However, with that said, and it goes really to that multi-channel approach, there are some things that are still working, and we should continue doing them until they don't work anymore. Direct mail, as I've mentioned, is the number one right now. One of the things affecting direct mail is cost. With postage at 60 cents a piece, that it becomes a costly channel to go through. TV, 30% mention it as really influencing their shoppers. These channels vitally important, but we can't forget what's going on in the digital realm, and we really have to take a look at those types of things. And there are a couple different avenues. So first and foremost, let's take a look at those acquisition tactics. Does paid search work? Do display ads work? Does social media work? Absolutely. 75% of this market is online. They're looking, they're searching, they're trying to find information. It's part of their whole intent in trying to educate themselves before they engage. Now, they are not specifically the key drivers to your lead generation, but they are definitely the supporters of that lead funnel. In fact, a great example, we took a look at direct mail responders. About 50% of those end up going online to a website to get more information. And so we look at these tactics in that multi-channel support as being able to be leveraged to get these individuals engaged. And so when we look at, like, for example, paid search, the search criteria that beneficiaries are looking at: cost, premiums, deductibles, comparison plans. What does Mass Advantage, or what does Medicare Advantage mean? What does Medicare Supplement mean? The search is out there. The education need is out there. As I mentioned earlier, education trumps sales, and these are the avenues in which we can raise those questions about what you need to know to get them to respond. When we look at some of the more traditional medias like newspaper and radio, they are really becoming less influential. Newspaper and radio, according to beneficiaries, are about less than 10% of what actually drive them to take action. Now, there is some support. For example, if running local seminars and having your seminar listings, or using newspaper for your freestanding inserts to represent those listings or meetings or things you want to. But in terms of driving that actual lead, that respondable lead, newspaper and radio are not doing what they used to do in the past. And when we take a look at those, one of the things in terms of that multi-channel avenue is constantly being able to, and this is the beauty of the digital channel. If I send out a direct mail piece today, and I realize that there's something I could capitalize on, maybe there's a plan that's disrupting in the marketplace, they're pulling out of the marketplace. For me to respond to that through direct mail can take up to a month. By the time I design, get my creative done, approved, get it filed with CMS, and get it out in the marketplace, a month could pass by. But when I take a look at the digital environment, I can make a change like that. I can capitalize on something happening either in the marketplace or nationally or locally, or a benefit that may mean something, and immediately respond to search from an individual looking to pushing it to people through social media and places like that to give that information to get them to engage. That's the beauty of the digital place. And then from a technology standpoint, when we look at the ability for an individual not only to go online, get educated, but also go through the whole funnel. They can engage with an agent or a broker online. They can engage with a salesperson. They can move that person all the way through the enrollment funnel, going through an enrollment engine and signing up for their plan. So as I look over the next 5-10 years, I see a shift happening. I see a shift on the reliance of more technology-based interactions, because you have a population that has grown up with a reliance on those. And even now, when you look at those that are 50 and under and how they use all the digital channels, such influence there on purchase behavior, recommendation, engagement, product differentiation, we're going to see those changes. But for this year, for the next few years, stay true. Direct mail, TV, support with your digital platforms, support it with your agent broker channels, and keep true to those channels.
So we're going to talk about digital in a moment, and that's a hot topic for a lot of the marketers we work with and we hear from. And Doug, you mentioned new plans, and it turns out Doug and I are working on a new plan that's coming to market here shortly. And so one of the things we talk about with them a lot is the acquisition cost and what sort of the historical norms are. And for the sake of time, we can do this one quick, but like, what are the kind of what are, broadly speaking, what kind of targets should they be thinking about acquisition cost all in, just kind of getting an idea of what that looks like?
It's kind of like asking the question, how long is a piece of string? Because every plan is different. And what I mean by that is when we take a look at an all-in cost, that is taking a look at everything put into the development of marketing as well as the media budgets that are used. And it really depends on the plan we're talking with. If it is an established plan that has established their marketing funnels and their approach strategies and their messaging and their branding, and it's been in market for years, and they have great word of mouth and they have great brand awareness, their cost per acquisition is going to be much less than a new plan entering a marketplace in a sea of 34 plans, having to raise their hand and say, hey, notice who I am. They're going to have to spend significantly more on some of those brand awareness building avenues in order to get that message in front of the beneficiary. But if we were to, throw all that to the wind and say, what are my bookends? You're looking somewhere between $500 to about $1,500 as an all-in cost per acquisition per beneficiary. Again, being very mindful of the things that could affect that, the plan size, plan position, plan product, plan benefits, and such. But that's a good range. If we average on, somewhere between 500 and 1,000 is good for planning purposes. And then, of course, based on a budget, you can always design your mix in how much direct mail versus TV versus digital that you're going to use.
So I do want to sort of jump ahead in our discussion a little bit because the whole digital marketing thing, we talked a moment ago about generations, and there's this supposition by a lot of, old school marketers that, seniors don't go online. And, first of all, the word senior is tricky, right? We've written blogs about that. Like, a whole bunch of people don't consider themselves a senior at 70. So, but, in terms of actual behavior, how is that, where is that today? You mentioned that, most people are online, but like, and it's obviously going to be an increasing part. Is it an important part? Like, tell us about, paid search, paid social, other forms of electronic marketing.
Yeah. So one of the things that's happened over time is kind of this movement. I think for the most part, we are all over our seniors too old for digital marketing. When you think if Steve Jobs were still alive today, he would be in Medicare, and and we can't underscore his contribution to the whole digital and technology landscape. But I like to use an example of my own parents, and this goes back 10 years ago. My dad, who just passed away recently at 91, lived on his phone. He was an avid Amazon user. He researched everything he did online. He loved the internet. He would print out articles. He would send me stuff that he'd read online. He was an active user and perfect individual to be pitched either through paid search or through display or through social media. My mom, on the other hand, brilliant woman. She used to read like 10 books a week, could type 150 words a minute. Never one day in her life went on the internet. So here you have a household with two different people on the spectrum of the digital landscape. So from a marketer's perspective, the question is, how do I market? And you do both. You make sure that you're using the traditional channels to reach my mom, and you also use the digital channels to reach my dad, who at 91 is not too old for digital marketing. But here's some stats and facts. 75% of seniors use the internet regularly. Over 70% of them are on social media, with Facebook being the number one. After seniors see non-digital TV or mail, 50% go online to check out that plan's website. And only compared to only about 20% who might actually directly call a plan or the call center associated with the plan. In terms of the use of the different channels, let's talk about paid search. One of the beauties is the anonymity of paid search. I can go in, regardless of my understanding of Medicare. I don't have to interact with somebody and show my ignorance. That's a human behavior. I can go in, I can look things up, I can get educated before I ever pick up a phone to call someone, go talk with my agent, or talk to someone else. Paid search drives that. The ability to take a look at what I'm searching for on the internet and driving ads to me across a variety of different ways, making sure that the ad is hitting me with what I'm looking for and what can be found on my site. It's paramount to a really good omni-channel strategy. When we look at social media, it's such a great interaction platform. I'm not stuck to a static ad. I have a dynamic ad. I can use carousels. I can use engagement strategies. I can speak to a senior along this whole continuum of education to enrollment at different times within their within their search. And the beauty of this, adding to that, the retargeting. If I come in and I'm brand new to Medicare and I'm trying to understand all the bells and whistles, features, terms, and terminology, we can understand that from a digital perspective. And I can track that person as they move through that journey so that my messaging out, whether it's through the social channels or through paid search or even my display ads, are targeting that or retargeting that individual at different life stages in that decision journey, up until even enrollment, and then beyond enrollment. For individuals when they're on a plan, being mindful of things that they might need to know, or even those that are aging into Medicare this year. Those that are 64. It's actually 3 months before their 65th birthday to 3 months after. Those are individuals we can reach through these channels and basically message to them and say, if you are turning into Medicare, here's what you need to know, and we can guide them down that whole path. That's how digital is really helpful in that, especially from a social media perspective, and the paid search.
Totally makes sense. And it's funny, the whole aging in crowd now, if you're thinking about 64, a whole bunch of people have jobs. They work on the internet all day. It's kind of a ridiculous fallacy to think they're sitting around watching reruns on broadcast TV.
And from that standpoint, that when they're on their free time, they're looking things up on the internet at work. Again, great avenue for paid search and for driving retargeting.
Yeah. It's funny, I had dinner last night. I was with my team. We talked about how it used to be broadcast TV kind of dictated family rhythms. Like the news would be at a certain time, and then 8 and 11 was like, the TV program. And now all that's irrelevant. It's a completely different landscape. So go ahead.
I'll add on something in terms of the digital landscape. The pushing, so to speak, getting people to whether we're using paid search or display or social media, it's that drive. As I mentioned, 50% will go online then, or will go through to the website. But I think one of the important things that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention is the importance of the lead capture, either the landing page, the microsite, or the website that they're landing on, because I may take an individual and do the best job in the world of educating them, but if I don't have the right pathway to engage them in the next step with a plan, then all I've done is educate them for a competitor. And so really part of the whole digital, what's beautiful about the digital world is we have the ability to create those endpoints that truly are tailored to an individual search or desire. So the wording that we can use can match what they're really searching for. And it gets them engaged with, this is a company that gets me personally, that wants to solve my issue. They're not trying to sell me, they're trying to educate me. And then even in that lead capture device, being able to utilize it in such a way to gather information as a lead for follow-up, either internally or externally, depending on what type of channels are being used. There's a point that's very interesting here. If you were to take a group of seniors and ask them, would you be willing to just, without any reason, give some personal information, your name, your phone number, and email address? 1 out of 2 will walk away. They'll say, no, I don't, I can educate myself. I don't need to give my information to a plan. However, if you add something, if you say, hey, we saw where you're searching, we know what you like. If you provide us your name and email address or your name and phone number, we can either send you or have somebody call you and give you a free plan comparison guide, a free Medicare education guide, a free I'm turning 65, what do I do next guide. When you do that, 60% of individuals will leave that information which is then perfect for that conversion pathway towards enrollment.
Yeah. And that adds complexity and cost, but it also adds to efficiency for sure. And that's really the table stakes, right? I mean, things are harder today. If you want to play in this, the big boys and the big girls, you have to be ready to do so. What are the challenges for plans offering Medicare Advantage these days?
Oh gosh, that's a really big question. Let's talk about a couple things. The ever-changing landscape, right? As as we talked about, this conversation would have been different 2 weeks ago. So we never really know what's going to happen with CMS. We have some big things happening right now. We have the CMS increase. We have the lawsuit out there about capping broker commissions. We have a new administration coming in that says they're supportive of Medicare. And so in terms of that environment, that's hard for plans to navigate because you make your decisions based on some solid answers there. So that's one struggle that we have to look at. Some of the other things we need to take a look at is plan comparity. Taking a look really at what can you offer your members while keeping your plan profitable that differentiates you from your competition. We happen to be in a sea of Me Too. Right, with 100 parent companies out there offering 34 different Medicare plans, you have to have a reason for somebody to look at you. And that could be for some of the intangibles. We might have parity on premiums and deductibles and out-of-pockets and some of the supplemental benefits. But where are we on customer service? Where are we on localization? Where are we on understanding the local community? Where are we on reaching out, making people feel like we're listening to them and that we're providing coordinated care and we're providing services above and beyond? That's where these plans really need to start making differences, especially as you know, the star ratings that are out there. The higher star ratings, the better you are perceived in some of these categories. And so really working towards that approach, your current customer experience, how they're being handled by the plan, taking care of issues that might be giving you that lower star rating. Addressing those helps you down longitudinally down the line as you increase your plans. So there are several things that the plans are struggling with this year, and again, it'll be interesting to see what happens with this rate increase because that may actually make, at least for 2026, not so much of a challenge as people were expecting in terms of gaining new members. Now, one thing to note, last year with the losing of those 16 plans, that put about 2 million beneficiaries out on the marketplace. So those are people that are having their first year experience with a new plan. Great opportunity for plans as we go to 2026 to reach out to that community of individuals to try to separate themselves from the plan they just joined.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And there are so many, obviously you have compliance, which is a huge issue. And from time to time, we get calls from people that are out of market being penalized by, being out of compliance, working with someone who doesn't know what they're doing. So that's a huge issue. But I'm curious, obviously we talk about who's trusted in healthcare, and it seems it's only doctors. I mean, the health plans and pharmaceuticals and hospitals these days have various levels of trust, and obviously we just had a horrific assassination of somebody from a health plan. Do you find that when it comes to Medicare Advantage, is there that love with it? And this is a much longer question we have time for today, but the trust factor, is that, you mentioned earlier trust is important, but that's the sort of pall of just mistrust of health plans in general. Is that a thing? And how do you handle for that?
It is, just tragically what happened, at the end of the year, and the effect of that, and even the backlash from that, the way our country kind of split over responding to that, and it tells you that this trust issue is paramount. Beneficiaries want to know that the plan that they're with, they're not looking for the plan to be a nonprofit, but they're also not looking for the plan to be, hitting the top end of their value of their stock, in history. They're looking for plans that deliver good service, value for what they're paying for, care for them as an individual, as a beneficiary, opportunity to make them healthier, and that goes into some of the supplemental benefits. They're looking for the ability to get referred. They're looking for the ability not to get denied on their claims. And so that's really, especially in light of current events, this year, plans really need to focus on building that trust with their potential beneficiaries. And then this is even more important, maintaining that with their existing members. Over time, 70% of MA members will switch. They'll churn to another event. Doesn't mean they do this every year, but eventually 70% will go to a different plan. And that sometimes is because of richer supplemental benefits or better cost scenarios. So this trust factor is part of that equation. And so as we go into 2026, it's two-pronged, making sure that your acquisition focuses on trust, but also your retention measures.
So on that note, Doug, in my experience, we'll do a lot more to avoid pain than get pleasure. So if I'm on a plan and I'm vaguely happy, I'm in that sort of zone of indifference, it's hard to get me to move generally. So do you find there's oftentimes sort of an inciting incident where people say, okay, that's it, I'm switching? And if so, what is it?
Well, yes. There are a couple of them. One is what's called a plan disruption. And that's when a plan decides, hey, we're not going to be in the marketplace anymore. They may withdraw from the county, or they may withdraw their plan entirely. And that's a disruption that affects everybody. It's like, as I mentioned last year, 2 million people had to find a new home, were forced into finding a new healthcare home. But apart from that, there are things that can happen during their experience with the plan, and those really have to do with their customer experience, the member experience, communication, being able to get information that they need, making sure that there's no confusion in what they're being billed for and how their payments are going and how their benefits are. That kind of communication and clarity. And then there's one event that happens every year. They call it the ANOC shock. It's when you get your annual notice of change, where a plan tells you what they're planning on doing in terms of your current rate, your premiums, your deductibles, basically the benefits of your plan, and how they're going to change year over year. And for some plans who have in the last few years thrown a lot of money to supplemental benefits, which are costly from a profitability standpoint, start pulling those back, and those are introduced in that ANOC letter, that incites people to start looking. Now, as I mentioned earlier, 33% of seniors are going to look on the average. It may go up a little bit, maybe go down, but about 33%, 1 out of 3, will look every AEP. About 60% will switch. Well, actually,
16% of that 30% or 16% overall?
16% overall will switch. Will end up choosing a different plan for whatever purpose or reason. And so those numbers may seem small, right? But when you look at 30, I think we're predicting around 37 million final enrolled for 2020 for calendar year 2025, and you take 16% of that, that's a lot of numbers switching back and forth. That's a lot of profitability for a health plan. And so shoring those up, if you know that you're having to raise your rates, then you need to communicate to your members in such a way that they understand the value of what they're getting for raising the rates. If you know that a plan is raising their rates and you've been good in terms of your cost per member per month, and you can absorb some additional supplemental benefits, it's a great time to start preempting with your existing members the good things that are happening or the things that are staying in place. And then, of course, October 1st, hitting hard, rolling out your new benefits or your differentiations that may make you more attractive than one of your competitive plans.
So let's talk about brand. So that's a lot of churn. That's a lot. More than I think most people would expect, because there's certainly inertia is easy. You just keep doing the same thing over and over again. But so now then you're talking about brand presence, and how can the brand obviously is really powerful, but what can the newer or lesser known plans do to stand out?
Yeah, it's tough. Brand matters. Absolutely, especially in a market that is overshadowed by these giants. When you take the Aetnas, the United Healthcares of the world. So when we look at the marketplace, there are about 100 plus parent companies. As I mentioned, they supply 4,000 plan offerings, but it's really the top 10 that dominate. So what do these smaller plans or newer plans do? You look at providing unique extras. things like going into providing chronic care SNPs or other things that help those with chronic needs, or better local provider networks and building those relationships. The number one question that beneficiaries ask is, will my doctor be in my network? Being able to make sure that that doctor is there, building really strong broker partnerships. At the end of the day, if I'm on commission and I've had a long-standing history with one of these big giants, and I've counted on that for my livelihood, and I have a new plan coming in, doesn't really offer much in a differentiation in terms of their product, it's going to be really hard for me to switch my book of business to something new. So it's really important for plans to educate the brokers on their plan differences, why it's easy to enroll, what they're doing for their beneficiary. Because the one thing that brokers hate is when one of their books of business comes in and says, "Hey, I've been talking to XYZ company, and they can offer me A, B, C, D, where the plan you put me on last year only offers A. Why didn't you tell me about them?" Brokers hate that, because it builds, again, it affects that trust relationship. So really building strong broker relationships. Newer plans, really focusing on digital first tools. And we're in an environment where we have, Medicare is going to continue, and the growth as people age into Medicare. These younger seniors are much more appreciative of digital transformation, digital use, and digital products in their everyday purchasing and approach. So by focusing on these digital first tools, they can be more nimble too. You can't take an Aetna and roll out a whole new digital plan that affects all their plans without a lot of cost and a lot of time. A smaller plan going into one or two counties or three counties has that ability to do that in a much quicker atmosphere. And then finally, really building your community outreach, building that trust factor in your local place, doing your health fairs, your senior center events, building face-to-face credibility, being in the place that the seniors are, representing yourself not as a sales organization, but as a community supportive organization are some of the strategies that will help a brand differentiate itself from the top 10.
So we've got a couple more questions before we wrap up here. One is, we talked about that churn. It was like, whoa, that's a lot. That's breathtaking. How expensive is that?
Well, so the value of retention changes. It used to be that the cost for acquisition was 8 times the cost for retaining an individual. And that changed every year, especially when we're looking at the Medicare Advantage community, knowing that 16% of Medicare enrollees switch every year. Disenrollment costs hundreds to thousands of dollars to reacquire that new member. And so really taking a look at retention techniques, being proactive in your benefit education. What's interesting, when you take a look at some of the supplemental benefits, there's lack of utilization, right? So I may have been moved in by let's say a card that gives me $200 off of my over-the-counter benefits, but I don't use it, then that doesn't become an influential benefit. So being able to be proactive with your members, showing them how to use key things like your dental, vision, hearing perks, some of the other ones like your fitness or your food or some of the other supplemental perks, really letting them know how to use it, where to use it, why it's important to them. Checking in with brokers. If you have a strong relationship with your broker, keeping them engaged with your plan, with updates, with things that are going, new things, growth strategies, helps that broker be more informed when they're talking. And of course, selling is people-based. So the more I'm in front of a broker, the more the broker knows me, the more he's inclined to recommend my company when he's talking to a beneficiary. And then, one of the things that when you look at complaints, every year CMS gets complaints from beneficiaries, and some of the top complaints really around delays or denials in care. And so taking a focus on those, are there things that we can do to bring those down, to increase or decrease the delay or increase the acceptance of referrals, because those two things will drive an individual away.
So, by the way, Doug, sometime soon we'll have to do another one of these talking about marketing to the brokers rather than the patients directly, because that's a big deal. Let's talk about marketing research, your favorite topic or one of them anyway.
Sure.
How to marketing research, and also compliance factors, or compliance, sort of factor into brand success?
Sure. Yeah. So, the bane of an existence for every Medicare marketer is CMS oversight, but it's important and it needs to be there. There are unscrupulous marketers out there that try to take advantage of the senior population, and so CMS being there to provide that type of oversight and approval is good. There have been some changes, in terms of the amount of time needed to approve ads and like TV ads or things in providers, and those are some challenges that we have to face from a compliance standpoint. But when we look specifically, your first question was about market research. Market research is vital, and here's why. It's the voice of these beneficiaries and it's the voice of these members where you get the true story of what's going on. If we reach out to beneficiaries in the marketplace and we say, "Hey, what are the differences between these three plans?" You're not going to get that. You're not going to get a response where they really know the differences. If you ask about their plan and what their plan benefits are, they're not really going to know much more than the top three things of that plan, even though we've pitched and moved them. Market research allows us to understand where those gaps are. And that goes back, let's talk about members first. That goes back in the retention category. If I understand where the gaps in education, understanding, and use of my benefits are, the better I can in communicating that out to my beneficiaries, which means when ANOC comes around, that letter comes around, they're more likely to stay with me. I want to get them into that 67% of individuals that are not shopping. Market research gives us the power to find those areas where we can affect change. Certain things aren't going to affect change. I may already have set in what my premium, deductible, and MOOP are going to be, but I can change some of the things that may be causing issues for my member. Using market research for competitive benchmarking, how do I compare if I'm a new plan or a plan that's been around for a few years, and I'm really trying to understand how I can find a niche against a larger competitor or even one of the national giants. Competitive benchmarking can really help, and things like focus groups, sitting down with members and asking the pure question of, you tell me, how can I, as small to medium-sized plan A, compete against this behemoth B? What do you need apart from premium, deductible, and MOOP parity? The results that come out of that are amazing. You will hear things that you didn't expect to hear that affect things like the way you communicate, how you communicate, what they want to hear from you as a plan, how you engage them. So those are just some of the ways that market research, from my perspective, helps. There's market research going on all the time through CMS. There are surveys out there that go through member experience and things like that. Every year, star ratings come out. The better the star ratings, the better. This is not an aha. The better it is for all plans. Seniors interpret a star rating of 4 to 5 stars as a hallmark of quality. So finding out where we're not a hallmark of quality is vitally important for plans. And then, internally, you can take a look at geo-targeting differences, county by county differences in plan availability or the local networks and how they feel, or things that they wish a plan would add, especially in this time we're taking a look at supplemental benefits. Everybody does the me too. Oh, this company is now offering $500, so I'm going to offer a $500 benefit card. Well, what if beneficiaries start talking about a benefit that you haven't heard about and it makes a difference? Maybe it's something local or something that's just confined to the area you're in. That's something that a plan can look at a cost per member per month and see if they can add it to, again, get those 66% to stay with the plan rather than look elsewhere.
Very good. And final question for today. I know this was a very meaty podcast, and thanks to our listeners who've been with us all the time. But I think you'll all agree, Doug has been fantastic in terms of being very, very thorough with lots of insights on a pretty complex topic. So, we're at the time of the year when we're recording and releasing this podcast where a lot of M&A or Medicare Advantage plans are going to be thinking about, okay, well, the year's over. We're, probably going to choose a different agency. We want to do things differently, or, we want to make improvements or whatever. So what should they be doing right now to prepare for AEP? Focus on thinking about aging and beneficiaries, and also keeping people from that ANOC shock you referred to.
Yeah. So, good question. The first bit of wisdom is don't delay. You need to be already working on this year's marketing, just because there are so many things that can change. As we know, we're waiting on that payment structure from CMS. So already understanding, looking through, optimizing your benefits messaging and where you might want to change your plan for next year, being prepared for that. Really segmenting your agent strategies. How are you going to win over those 64 and a half that are turning 65 that'll be eligible in their initial enrollment period for 7 months? How are you getting them into that funnel, introducing them to Medicare Advantage, following them along that pathway, and then getting them to enroll? That's a bump to your 2025 plan membership. Looking at your onboarding, we just finished a really good AEP. There was a lot of growth. Some companies are already coming out and talking about, their 16, 18, 22% growth in membership. But a critical thing happens now. All these members are on a new plan and they need to be onboarding, making sure your onboarding strategies are great. Communication, how they interact, being digital friendly, addressing messaging by generation from the younger boomers and Gen X when they come in to the older, and being able to provide them forms and information in the way that they like to consume it. And so making sure that you have a seamless onboarding is key to that. Taking a look at your retention, doing a mid-year outreach to your members to let them know how to maximize their plan, their dental visits, their free fitness programs, their supplemental benefits, engaging the brokers, and checking in with them personally, and to discuss things that might be coming up in changes, both good and bad, keeping them informed. And then again, as I mentioned, simplifying that prior authorization, and then really taking a look at analyzing last year's AEP. Don't wait until March, May, June, July to look at what you did last year. Completely evaluate your channels. How did direct mail do? How did TV do? How did your seminars do? How did your digital performance? What was providing you the least cost per sales qualified lead? What was providing you the best enrollment? Really digging into those numbers, because it's in that analytics where you're really going to find ways to adjust your marketing channel. And then finally, being up to date on compliance and logistics. So many things are going on and changes. Making sure, especially if you're a plan marketer and you are overwhelmed and you have all these things to do, really engaging an agency that understands how to market Medicare Advantage, how to market in the healthcare space, how to navigate compliance and logistics, how to think strategically and offer tactically solutions that help move the needle. Those are things that health plans can be doing today to ensure that they have success in this upcoming 2026 AEP.
Very good, Doug. That was awesome. You did a great job, as I knew you would. You can see why our clients love you so much when we bring you involved with our Medicare and Medicaid plans. So that's really, I have nothing to add. We covered a lot of territory. We could go even deeper on most of these topics we discussed today. But I would reiterate that if you're interested in, looking into this more deeply, Doug leads our team when it comes to these kinds of things. We'd be glad to help or provide any insight that you need. So, Doug, great. We've got work to do on our clients. So I'm sure you can get back to all that, but great job.
Thanks, Stuart. Great. Thank you for having me.
Good.